All right, we are looking at the religions of the Greco-Roman society of the Roman Empire. And the last one that we're going to look at here is astrology. Astrology is the teaching that the stars control human destiny. It began in Babylonia, and during the conquests of Alexander the Great was introduced to the West. Alexandria was the center of the study of astrology, and it was there that it was practiced as a pseudoscience. This pseudoscience could be quite technical and sound very impressive. The following is a fragment of a technical, quote, astrological work from the late 2nd or 3rd century AD. If, in addition, Mercury is in conjunction and Saturn is irregularly situated from an unfavorable position, if at the same time Mars is in opposition to Saturn, the aforesaid position being maintained, he will destroy profits of transactions. Saturn in triangular relation to Mars signifies bad fortune. Jupiter in triangular relation to Mars or in conjunction makes great kingdoms and empires. Venus in conjunction with Mars causes fornications and adulteries. If in addition Mercury is in conjunction with them, they in consequence make scandals and lusts. Well, I'm not going to read the whole thing, but it sounds very sophisticated, real science, but actually it's a pseudoscience. It's hocus pocus. It's the idea that the stars control our lives here on Earth. You know, the Magi from the East were astrologers, and they followed the star to where Christ was born. Augustus, Tiberius, and Vespasian all used astrology. What 20th century world leader used astrology? Anybody know? A 20th century world leader? Adolf Hitler. Adolf Hitler used astrology to plan his war movements, and we're probably fortunate that he did, because he lost the war, and maybe that's why. Also, the wife of the American President Ronald Reagan, Nancy Reagan, would plan her White House entertainment schedule using astrology. So it's still around. How many of you in your countries, in your newspapers, have a little section on astrology?
We still have feng shui, sir.
Feng shui, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Very, very active.
All right. Any others?
Horoscopes.
Yeah, horoscopes. That's it. Yeah.
Yes, we have that in our newspapers.
Do you?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, and we have it here in America too. And you know, some Christians read it, but
Yeah.
they don't really pay any attention to it, because it's also general. You know, like, today you're going to meet somebody, or, something really good is going to happen today. So you start thinking about it. Well, let me see. Yeah, something good did happen to me. Okay, yeah, astrology must be true, right? No. But this was a very powerful force in the 1st century. Okay, we are going to go then to philosophy. And we're only going to cover a couple philosophies, even though we have more in the PowerPoint, but we're not going to take the time to go into all of them. Philosophy has been defined as the attempt to correlate all existing knowledge about the universe into systematic form and to integrate human experience with it. Philosophies are based on reason, not revelation. Over the centuries, to a greater or lesser degree, but they were not part of the original teaching of Scripture. The writer, but they didn't get their teaching. Now, the first one that we want to mention is Platonism in the 4th century before Christ. His philosophy taught that for everything idea in heaven, the real is the world of heavenly ideal of the real. This ideal world has an objective existence, and the material world is only a dim reflection to what we call Platonic dualism, the idea that the unseen world is good and the material world is evil. Therefore, the goal was to escape the material world. The way to salvation and asceticism. Salvation comes through knowledge, while ignorance is sin. Spread, it's evil. It is the immaterial that you cannot touch or see or feel that is the good. Now, Plato explained his ideas in the allegory of the cave. He says that all mankind is like prisoners in a cave. They are chained so that they can't people chained. They have chains on their hands and they cannot look around. All they can see is what is in front of them. And behind that, the mouth of the cave where light comes in. Above and behind them is a fire blazing in the wall of the cave. On the wall behind them are men and animals and statues, which these prisoners have never seen. That's because they can't look around. All the prisoners can see are the shadows of them. The figures are distorted and not at all like the real figures. Distorted reflections, they think that that is reality. If someone, at first it would be painful on his eyes because of the great light, but if he persisted, he would be able to see all the real world and he would never want to live again in the cave. But if he went down and tried to tell his former companion, wouldn't believe him, and perhaps they would kill him. Now, the meaning of the allegory is clear. The prisoners in the cave are the people of the world. The figures on the wall behind them are the realities of the heavenly world of ideas. The distorted figures reflected on the wall in front of them are the material objects that we see on earth. The person who escapes and returns with the truth about the real world. Now, the ultimate release from this problem of the material world comes through, they had a saying that went soma sema. The body is a tomb, east from the body. So this body, according to them, is no good, you know? It's tainted, it's to lay aside the body and immaterial existence. You know, they call that the immortality of the soul, so that they can have this heavenly bodiless existence. The Bible doesn't teach that the Bible teaches that there is going to be resurrection out the body, but ultimately there is going to be resurrection and with our bodies, with transformed and glorious bodies. Now, if you tell that, it's going to be his worst nightmare. Hey, I want to lay aside this body, and you're telling me I'm going to have one for eternity? Well, yeah, and it's going to be good because God's creation is good. The material is not bad. Look around you. What you see is good. The blue sky, the green grass, the blue ocean, all of this is good. And it's God's handiwork, and it shows God's glory. Think of the Psalms, Psalm 104, celebration of God's goodness in his creation. So you see on the left side, the fire and the sunlight coming in. You see the people go back and forth, and the prisoners, and then in front of the prisoners I want to show you a video. So let's give this a try. Let me know if you can. Just give me a thumbs up, okay? And we'll give this a try.
Imagine prisoners that spend their entire lives chained deep inside.
Can you hear it?
They have the chains so they cannot see behind themselves.
It's very
I
slow,
can hear it. We can hear it, but there's a lot of static
and
in
it's
it.
very slow.
That have spent their entire lives chained deep inside a cave. They have been chained so that they cannot see behind themselves, and they are forced to stare endlessly at the cave wall in front of them. Behind them, a fire is burning. And between the prisoners and the fire is a raised walkway. Now imagine.
Can you hear it?
It's still staticky, sir.
Still staticky. Yeah, and your voice is staticky too. Okay. Okay. Anyway, that was just a depiction of what I was talking about there. So we will go ahead and not do that. Okay, let's go on to Gnosticism. Well, first of all, do you have any questions about Platonism? If you think about the Christian teaching that you've gotten, it may have been affected by Platonism. The idea that only the spiritual is good, the body doesn't matter for anything, only the spiritual. Can you hear me okay? Okay.
Yeah.
I can hear you.
Okay, good. That the spiritual is the only thing that's good about us. Our bodies are pretty bad things. That is not biblical. That comes from Plato. It doesn't come from the Bible. And Platonism led to what we're going to look at next, and that's Gnosticism. So let us get into Gnosticism here, and we'll talk about this a little more. The form of Gnosticism, of which we know the most, grew out of Platonism. Its name comes from the Greek word for knowledge, gnosis, because it promised salvation through knowledge. Salvation comes to the elite who receive some esoteric knowledge not available to the rest of mankind. Gnosticism built upon the dualism of Plato, saying that the material was evil and the spiritual good. It posited a totally spiritual, impersonal God. Okay, so the great God of Gnosticism is totally spiritual, has nothing to do with this material universe. Between it and the earth was a whole network of emanations or eons, each a little inferior to the other, that is less spiritual and more material, until finally the last one created the material world. That, they said, was the God of the Old Testament. But salvation comes from renouncing the material world and seeking the invisible spiritual world. Gnostics deny the true humanity of Christ. For them, he was a very high eon, a purely spiritual being who came down to earth, but never was incarnated as a man. He either came upon the man Jesus after his birth and left him before the crucifixion, or he didn't have a real body. It was a phantom body, not real flesh and blood. We call that docetism. So this is what the Gnostics believed about reality. That God, the great God, is not the one who created the universe, but he rather was a great spiritual being. And let me see if I can illustrate this. Well, we're getting the square lines again. This represents the great God. And then from him, there are these emanations that come down. And there is a whole network of thousands, maybe millions of these beings, principalities and powers, perhaps Paul would call them. They come from the great spiritual God, and if you go down far enough, with every step, they are a little less spiritual. And finally, when you get way down to the end, you will see a being that is actually so unspiritual that he could create a material universe. And for them, that is the God of the Old Testament. Now, for them, Jesus came down to our universe to rescue us from the God of the Old Testament. So they reject the Old Testament. The Gnostics reject it. In fact, some of them believed in like an inverted ethic. The God of the Old Testament for them was evil. And so that God gave the 10 Commandments. So you shouldn't keep the 10 Commandments. You should do the opposite. If the 10 Commandments say, thou shalt not murder, then you need to murder. If it says, thou shalt not commit adultery, then you need to commit adultery. And for them, the heroes of the Old Testament are the bad guys, and the bad guys in the Old Testament are the heroes. Okay? So this is the concept of Gnosticism. The mind, the spirit, is the good part, and the material part is either evil or simply worthless. Doesn't matter. Okay? Are you all with me here? You understand what I'm saying? Okay.
I got a little confused on who was it that thought that the God of the Old Testament was bad again?
The Gnostics.
Okay. And how did that play into Christianity? Was that a prevalent idea then in the New Testament?
It was there, I believe, in an early form. And we would call that I'm sorry, my handwriting's so bad here. Proto-Gnosticism, an early form of Gnosticism. Gnosticism as a movement came into its fullness in the 2nd century. But all of it was there in the beginning when in the 1st century when the Bible was written. And I will give you an illustration of this. Let me go ahead and erase this. Because unfortunately, if I go to another slide, it's still going to be there on the other slide. Okay. All right. There is a kind of proto-Gnosticism in New Testament days, and it is reflected in the books of Colossians, 1 Corinthians, 1 Timothy, and 1 John, among others. An interesting thing about Gnosticism is that it can result in 2 opposite ethical standards: asceticism on the one hand, and licentiousness on the other. So here we have the mind superior to the body. It can, if you believe that, how is it going to affect your behavior? In one of 2 opposite ways. With the libertine ethic, it leads to licentiousness and self-expression. And it says, since the body is of no account, it doesn't matter how you use it. Do with it what you want. So whatever you want to do it. You know, your body doesn't matter. Now, the other way is a rigorous ethic that leads to asceticism and self-denial. And it says, since the body is evil, repress it or do not gratify it. So asceticism is refusing to give yourself pleasure for spiritual reasons. Now, as an illustration of that, think of 1 Corinthians 6 and 1 Corinthians 7, two chapters that are right together. In 1 Corinthians 6, there are men in the church who are going to prostitutes. Now, for us, this is unthinkable. Well, it was part of first century culture. It was just a part of life. But these Christians had not separated themselves. They had not adopted a truly kingdom ethic. And so they were still going by the ethics of the Greco-Roman Empire. So men were going to prostitutes, and they were probably saying, it doesn't matter how I use my body. My spirit is right. You know, I'm right with God. So, you know, everything's fine. If you go to chapter 7, the very next verse, you will see that there were people in the same church who believed that there should be no sexual expression at all, even in marriage. Just the exact opposite of chapter 6. How is it possible that you have these two different positions in the same church? I think probably right here, what you see on the screen, a proto-Gnostic view of life. Some of them are going to the libertine ethic. Others are going to the rigorist ethic. Now, both of those ethics are wrong. Why? Because the idea that the mind is superior to the body, or the spiritual is good and the material is bad, is wrong. It's unbiblical, but it has crept into the church. And the church has been affected by philosophy over the centuries. And perhaps our own outlook is affected by that. This is not a healthy Christian view. A healthy Christian view is that the body is good. And we should celebrate our bodies. Sexuality is good. And it should be celebrated within marriage. That is a healthy view of what the Christian life is about. Okay, let me open it up for questions or comments.
So, sir, as the libertine ethic and rigorist ethic, they are they sort of evil? Like, they are against the purity of the body through marriage. Is that right? Or
probably the men in Corinth were married. The ones that went to prostitutes, they probably were married. So in that sense, they're not rejecting marriage. And in chapter 7, those people were probably married too, because there was a problem of people being married but refusing to have sex with their partner. And what does Paul say? He says that you should give to each other the needs that you have in your marriage, one of which is the need for sex. And he says, if you don't, you need to do that. One reason is that without that, the men are being tempted. And there are instances of sexual immorality. So sex in marriage is healthy. It's the way God made us. And we shouldn't deny that. We shouldn't be embarrassed that is the case. When I grew up, the word sex did not exist in our family. There was no such word. And, you need to protect your children from the concept that we are sexual beings. Well, I don't think that's healthy.
Yeah.
We are sexual beings, and we need to have a healthy outlook on that.
Mm.
Doctor, I have a question.
Yes.
Thank you.
Does it mean that the rigorous ethic caused other believers to do sexual immorality because of their belief on this? And the libertine ethic, did it cause the incest happening during that time in the Corinth church, or because of these ethics?
Incest you're talking about.
Yes.
Okay.
And other sexual immorality problems during that time.
Yes. People who had the libertine ethic would say, you can do whatever you want. We're free in Christ. All things are lawful. Is that what they said? All things are lawful. Paul said, well, but not all things benefit. All things are lawful, but I will not be put in bondage to anything, including my sexuality. So the libertine ethic, a Christian cannot accept the libertine ethic. All things are not okay. Some things are wrong, and one of those is sexual immorality. Now, the rigorous ethic also resulted in immorality, according to Paul, because there is a need to have that part of your being fulfilled. And if it's not being fulfilled, then you could very well be tempted to get that satisfaction elsewhere and not in your marriage. And that's why Paul says, in chapter 7, the woman's body does not belong to her, but to her husband. And the man's body does not belong to him, but to his wife. And, you need to have a healthy sex life. Probably nobody has paraphrased 1 Corinthians chapter 7 in quite that way, but that's what he's saying. Do a study of that. I've never heard that passage preached on. Yes, Elise?
I think I'm so thankful to Paul, how he countered the mindset of the philosophers. We now found out that the Corinthian philosophers are more like the human mind sort of that time. But I am so thankful, and thanks to God and Paul alone for countering how to use our body, the sense of how God creates us.
Mm-hmm.
So
That's
to
right.
me, thanks for bringing up the topic, Doctor. To me, it's so great.
That's right, Elise. Paul has a reputation for being a pretty sour woman hater who doesn't want anybody to have any fun, and is just a pretty lousy guy. That's not true. Paul has a very healthy view of life, and you read passages like this in 1 Corinthians 6 and 7, in 1 Timothy 4, there were people who were saying you shouldn't get married. And Paul says, that is absolutely wrong. They were saying you shouldn't eat certain foods. Paul says, you can eat whatever food you want. It's a gift of God. Enjoy it. And also in 1 Corinthians chapter 10, the earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof. It's his, And that is a very healthy view of life. And we need to get back to that healthy view, not a distorted view, either toward rigorism or licentiousness. We need that healthy view that is right in the middle there, that looks realistically through Christian eyes at our world. Yeah.
Sir,
Yes.
sir, isn't it it is Paul who said that in everything be moderate? There's a verse in one of his epistles which he said in everything be moderate. I think that's
I
the
believe
King
so.
James Version. Moderate. Yeah.
Sir, I have a question, sir.
These are two extreme positions.
Yeah, I think excuse me, Rebecca is asking a question. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, those are two extremes.
Yes, and don't you think, sir, this libertine ethic, we can see this, can we observe or notice that a sort of this kind of ethic in our society nowadays?
Yeah,
With entertainment and all that. It's so what if I like it? And so that's it. It's just like the narcissistic attitude and with that kind of ethic. I like.
Right.
So it's just like absolute freedom. I can do anything I like because I'm free, and with
That's right.
and also there's no limitation. There's no boundaries.
That's right.
And that's why I like what Paul said: in everything be moderate.
So
That's
in
right.
our culture today, it's moving toward the licentious side rather than the rigorous side. There aren't too many people who are really rigorous, self-denial, not having any pleasure. But there are a lot of people who are living for pleasure, no matter what kind it is, whatever they want. So, yeah. Russell.
Dr. Gil, I just want to ask a question in regards to Paul encouraging the believers not to marry or to have celibacy. What's the issue in regards also to the rigoristic and libertine issue that's happening around them? Because I think he wanted to emphasize more of being of not marrying rather than marry. Yeah, something like that.
Okay, yeah. In 1 Corinthians chapter 7, Paul deals with what we've just been talking about here for the first 7 verses, and then he goes on and he deals with other situations. And for those who, the way I interpret this, we can't go into this in detail, but for those who are engaged, planning to get married, he says he believes that they would be happier if they didn't. Now, why does he say that? Because he was anticipating a crisis. And he doesn't tell what the crisis was. And people have speculated, what is the crisis? But he said, in light of the present crisis, he says, I feel that you would be better off not to get married. However, he says, if you choose to get married, you've not sinned. Let every person do what he is convinced that he should do. So if you feel like you should get married, go ahead and do it. You've not sinned. It's fine. But he says, my personal opinion is that because of the present crisis, you would be better off remaining single for the time being. Now, he says he wishes that everybody had the gift of celibacy. The gift. He said, I wish you all could be like me. But some people have one gift, other people have another gift. There are people who have the gift of celibacy. They do not need marriage. The great scholar John Stott was one of those people. He lived his whole life single. So there are people who do not need to be married. That is their gift. Most of us do not have that gift. Most of us want to be married, and if we are not married, we need to have the role of celibacy. Even if we don't have the gift, we have the role. That is, we stay celibate. We do not engage in sexual activity if we're single. So I'm not sure, Russell, if I answered your question there, but those are my thoughts. Those are my thoughts on it.
Because sir, I was thinking that Paul was a little bit rigoristic when it comes to that issue, because he would, I think he had more emphasis of not getting married than to encourage others to get married. So that's just how I interpreted the passage.
Yes, yes. He believes that people would be happier under the circumstances to stay single. But he was not against marriage. And if you read the whole chapter, read it in detail, you can see it's basically, if you're going to decide whether or not to get married, you can't make a wrong decision. Either one is good. What is God's will for you? That is the question. So, yeah, that's an interesting thing. He says, you know, on some things we have Christ's actual teaching, and on others we don't. And some of those things we don't. So Paul is speaking under inspiration, but he's not speaking at something that Jesus said. Okay, I want to finish here by reading you something from N.T. Wright about the Greco-Roman world. And how did the Greco-Roman world accept Christianity? What was it like? And he deals with this in his book, The New Testament and the People of God. You know, there are those who say that the world was ready for Christianity. You know, everything was ready, and there were no problems. They just preached the message and everybody just accepted Christianity. It was the right time. In the fullness of time, God sent his son. Well, it's not exactly that simple. So I'll get to this after the break. We'll take a 10-minute break here, and then we'll get back. So have a good break. All right, I want to share with you something written by N.T. Wright. It's on Moodle, and I don't remember what I named it, maybe Christianity in the Roman World, but it is there. And this is what he said about the spread of Christianity in the Greco-Roman society. Christianity did not spread by magic. It is sometimes suggested that the world was, so to speak, ready for Christianity. Stoicism was too lofty and dry. Popular paganism, metaphysically incredible and morally bankrupt. Mystery religions, dark and forbidding. Judaism, law-bound and introverted. And Christianity burst on the scene as the great answer to the questions everyone was asking. There is a grain of truth in this picture, but it hardly does justice to historical reality. Christianity summoned proud pagans to face torture and death out of loyalty to a Jewish villager who had been executed by Rome. Christianity advocated a love which cut across all racial boundaries. It sternly forbade sexual immorality, the exposure of children, and a great many other things which the pagan world took for granted. Choosing to become a Christian was not an easy or natural thing for the average pagan. A Jew who converted might well be regarded as a national traitor. Even slaves, who might be supposed to have less to lose than others, and hence to appreciate an elevation in status through conversion, might face a cost. As we saw, Pliny thought it normal to interrogate with torture slave girls who happened to be part of the early Christian movement. We have no reason to suppose that interrogation under torture was any easier for a young woman in the 2nd century than it is in the 20th. Why then did early Christianity spread? Because early Christians believed that what they had found to be true was true for the whole world. The impetus to mission sprang from the very heart of early Christian conviction. If we know anything about early Christian praxis, it is that early Christians engaged in mission, both to Jews and to Gentiles. The irresistible expansion of the Christian faith in the Mediterranean world during the first 150 years is the scarlet thread running through any history of primitive Christianity. This missionary activity was not an addendum to a faith that was basically about something else, like a new existential self-awareness. Christianity was never more itself than in the launching of the world mission. Justin tells of his meeting with an old man who talked to him about Jesus. Pliny speaks of the poison of Christianity spreading into villages and countryside. Ignatius finds churches wherever he goes throughout Asia Minor. Tacitus, in the tone of voice of one who has come across a dead rat in his water tank, comments that all the worst features of the world culture, find their way to Rome sooner or later. And if we look for a moment at the canonical writings, we find them full of mission. Matthew's Jesus instructs the disciples to make disciples and baptize all in the world, or baptize in all the world. Luke's Jesus commissions his followers to go to Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, and the ends of the earth. And John's Jesus says, "As the Father sent me, so I send you." The story of Acts is the story, or rather a story, of early Christian mission. And whatever we may think of the portrait of Paul in Acts, the letters confirm that not only did he, but a good many other Christians believed it their business to travel around the known world, telling people that there was another king, this Jesus. World mission is thus the first and most obvious feature of early Christian praxis. So, was the world ready for Christianity, the Greco-Roman world? Well, maybe to some degree, but it wasn't what some people think. It was hard to be a Christian in the early days. There was persecution. Some Christians suffered martyrdom because of it. But they always spread the gospel wherever they went. And they were effective. They turned the world upside down. All right, any questions or comments now before we finish up here?
Dr. Galen?
Yes, Ed.
I have a question regarding dualism and the Gnosticism that we just talked about. In the Gospel of John, there is also somehow a similar concept of it. There are some dualisms that we can find there, like kingdom of darkness, kingdom of light, and one of the dualism that's presented there is the flesh and the spirit, wherein the flesh is somehow evil because it belongs to this world, and that the spirit belongs to the world above. Something like that. Can we say that the writing or the author of John, the Gospel of John, was also affected by these concepts that we have discussed? Or did he write those things that are dualistic in nature, like from the perspective of the author, he wrote those things towards an audience who has culturally have been influenced by these things that we have talked about?
Yeah, I would say the latter of what you suggested. When you look at the term flesh, normally the word flesh does not refer to our bodies. It is a spiritually negative term. And it refers to the fact that we, in a sense, have our backs turned toward God. We have a fallen nature, but that is spiritual, that is not physical. And there are dualisms in John. What is from above, what is from below, light and darkness, life and death, and that kind of thing. But it's not Platonic. It is not material versus spiritual. If you look at 1 John, you can see that he is responding against a proto-Gnostic influence. What we have seen, what we have touched, all of this referring to Jesus. And he talks about those who deny that Jesus came in the flesh. Wow, that sure sounds like Gnosticism. Okay? So he's dealing with what we would call docetism, those who say that Jesus didn't really have a flesh and blood body. Any other questions or comments?
Can I ask a question, please?
Yes.
Doctor, do you think, as you mentioned, do you think whether the world is ready for Christianity or not? Do you think the Greco-Roman time is a time for Christianity?
Do I think what now? Say the last part again.
The Greco-Roman time is the time for Christianity.
Greco-Roman style?
Whether the world is ready for Christianity or not. Do you think that the Greco-Roman time is the time for Christianity?
The Greco-Roman culture was very corrupt. And so it was not something that would welcome Christianity. If you look at the sexual ethic, if you look at how they exposed children, if you look at how they enslaved people, all of this is something that is not compatible with Christianity. Christianity would transform Greco-Roman culture. So Christianity was countercultural. It was not something that, you present it and they would say, oh man, that sounds really good. I really like that. I really like that I can no longer carry on a sexual affair with somebody. They wouldn't say that. I really like that I need to care for the poor. No, it was countercultural. And if we're really true to Christianity, we're probably going to be countercultural today as well.
I think I was asking I'm not really asking in the culture, Greco-Roman culture, because I know for sure it's the corruption thing. But I was asking for the time, whether the Greco-Roman time was the right time for Christianity
Yes, I would say it was the right time because in the fullness of time, God sent his son. Or we could say at the right time. It was the right time, but that did not mean that the Greco-Roman culture welcomed Christianity. That's just why there were so many martyrs. So many people laid down their lives. Right. Right.
Thank you.
All right. Let us move.
Sir,
Go ahead. Yes.
sorry, but
Mhm.
but Romans are Christians, aren't they?
Romans are Christians? No, Romans were pagans. They were pagans. They did not worship God. They did not worship the God of the Old Testament. They did not worship Jesus. They worshiped idols. So a church was started in Rome, and Paul wrote to them, and so he called it or we call it the letter to the Romans. Those people that he was writing to were Christians, but Roman culture at large was not at all Christian.
Mhm.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Let us go on then. I am going to stop the screen share. And I am going to disconnect my monitor, which I think I have to do in order for it to work. We will then share the next thing here, which is tools for New Testament studies. All right. And let me see if I can get this to work then. See, you don't have the full screen on the PowerPoint, do you? Okay. So I'm going to, I left out one step. Have to disconnect it again. Okay, do you have the full screen now? Okay.
Yes. Yes. sir.
Fantastic. The devil's not going to win on this one. We are going to be victorious. This is going to work. All right. We are ready.
Amen, sir.
All right. Okay, we are going to look at tools for the study of the New Testament. What are the tools that we are going to use as we study? And I'm going to just mention a few different kinds. First of all, Greek texts. Now, I realize that most of you do not read Greek. And so this may seem irrelevant, but I just need to mention it. So when you do study Greek, you will have this knowledge. The two most popular Greek texts are the Greek New Testament put out by the United Bible Societies, the UBS Greek New Testament, and the Nestle Allen Greek New Testament. The UBS Greek New Testament is more for pastors, missionaries, translators, and the Nestle Aland is more used by scholars. Both of them are good, important. The UBS is more user-friendly. So if you're going to get a Greek New Testament, I would recommend that over Nestle Aland until you know it pretty well. And we'll show you some of those later on. There is also the Greek New Testament produced by Tyndale House, Cambridge. It came out in 2017. It's a new New Testament. And then the Society of Biblical Literature, the SBL Greek New Testament. Those are the four, with the first two being the most popular. Until just a few years ago, they were basically the only ones that were used by most people. Okay, an assortment of good translations. And I just list here several translations. The King James Version, that's the granddaddy of them all. Translated in 1611. It's what I grew up on. When I grew up, everybody used King James, nothing else. The liberals would use maybe the RSV, but we in our church never did. It wasn't until I got into college that we used the RSV. But everybody knew the same verses, memorized the same ones. It's a brand new day now. Seems like every month, it seems like a new translation comes out. Let's just look at the rest of these. These would be the major translations. The NASB, New American Standard Bible, is a quite literal translation. A new version came out in 2020, a revision. It's quite literal. The NRSV, the New Revised Standard Version, is a very good translation. It's made by liberals as well as conservatives. It is gender neutral. The NIV, the New International Version, most recent revision in 2011. Of all the ones that are here, this would be my pick, my recommendation. I teach exegetical courses here at APTS, and quite frequently, I would have to say, when I was using the NIV 1984, I would have to say, the NIV just got it wrong here. This is the way it ought to be. Well, when the 2011 came out, virtually every place that I had to say that had been changed to what I said it ought to be. So, that made me really think, hey, they've really done a good job. The Good News Bible began as an evangelistic tool. It's translated at about a 6th grade level so that it's easy to understand. It's quite a good translation. The Revised English Bible is a British translation. So unless you speak British English, it may not be the best one for you. It is a revision of the New English Bible. And once many years ago, I decided I would do my Bible reading that year from the New English Bible. And I made a whole list of terms that I didn't know what they meant. Had to look them up in dictionaries to find out, because it's British English. The New Jerusalem Bible and the New American Bible are both Roman Catholic versions, but they're both quite good translations. And then some people would also add the ESV, the English Standard Version, which has become quite popular among some people. It is not my favorite. And on Moodle, there is an article entitled, "Why the English Standard Version, the ESV, should not become the Standard English Version." And it tells of some really interesting things about it. And so I would encourage you just to look at that. It's a long article, but it's very, very interesting. It is, according to Gordon Fee, it was produced in order to stem the tide toward women's equality. So it is, it takes a complementarian view of the man-woman relationship rather than the egalitarian view. And I heard a person speaking from Romans chapter 16, and I looked at it in the NIV and the ESV, and you could see this coming through. In chapter 1 there, or verse 1, it mentions Phoebe. The NIV calls her a deaconess or a deacon. The ESV calls her a servant. In verse 7, Junia, it says, is well known among the apostles in the NIV, as if she is an apostle. The ESV says she is known by the apostles. And those presuppositions come through in different translations. In terms of types of Bible translations, on the left here, we have word for word, trying to stay as close as you can to the original language when you translate it into English. In the middle, you have thought for thought, or we call it dynamic equivalence. And then on the right, we have paraphrase, very loose. You can't even call it a translation, it's a paraphrase. The way on the left, you have an interlinear, Greek words with the English translation over each word. And then we have the NASB, the Amplified, the ESV, the RSV, and we move along. The NIV is right about in the middle. And then over to the right, on the far right, we have the Message, the Eugene Peterson translation, which is, it doesn't stay close to the original languages at all. And so you have to be very careful, because if the paraphraser isn't right, then you're going to be led off track. So my recommendation would be get something from the middle, the dynamic equivalence. You all speak different languages, and you know that you can't translate word for word. Every language has idioms, which if you translate word for word, make no sense. You have to go with thought for thought. And so that is what I would recommend. Do you have questions or comments here?
Sir?
Yes.
I have I think 2 to 3 questions.
Okay.
One is, so what can you say with the latest translation, which is TPT, the Passion Translation? Yeah.
I've not used it. I've not used it. I know some people do. I would really have to look into it. I've heard some criticism of it, but I really can't speak with any authority on that.
Yeah.
My understanding is it's a paraphrase.
Is it a paraphrase?
It's a paraphrase and perhaps more loose than the Message.
Oh, okay.
More loose than the Message, or yeah. It's
okay.
It's not yet complete. They don't have, I think with the Old Testament, they only have the Psalms, but the other books, there's none yet. So I don't know. With the other questions, there is about the King James Version. What can you say about the New King James Version? It's this, of course,
the King James Version is a revision of the King James Version.
Yes.
It stays very close to the King James.
Yes.
But it takes out the thee and thou and updates the language. The
Yes.
problem with both of them, and what we're going to get to this next in textual criticism, the problem with both of them is that they don't use the older and better manuscripts. They use later and inferior manuscripts. And so I would not recommend either one of those as your study Bible. Now, the King James, is a magnificent translation. It's formative for the English language. And, but what we want to do is get one that uses the oldest and best manuscripts, one that communicates in today's language so that people can truly understand it. And King James doesn't do that very well.
Sir?
And the third question, sir, is so with those I have read that there are with the NIV translation compared to, I don't know if it's comparing to King James version, the KJV, there are some deletion in NIV, that the whole text or the whole verse is not complete with the NIV. There's some verses mentioned. So that's like, I think what
this is something that really gets to me.
Yes.
You go on Facebook and you see people say, the NIV has taken verses out of the Bible, and they go on, and it's published by Zondervan, that is owned by HarperCollins, which publishes the Satanic Bible. And so we've got to get rid of this NIV.
Even ESV.
And so, a friend of mine put that on, a fellow missionary lady. And I went on and I said, do you really think that all the modern translations have conspired to take out these verses because they don't like the theology or something? And besides that, did you know that HarperCollins also owns Thomas Nelson Publishers, which publishes the King James and the New King James? So if we're going to throw out the NIV, we're going to have to throw out the King James and the New King James as well. What the church needs today is to understand what we are going to be studying next in this class, and that is textual criticism. There is a crying need in our movement for people to understand textual criticism. And if they did, they wouldn't put this garbage on Facebook. Okay. I'm getting a little carried away. Okay. I'm getting a little carried away. What's that?
How can that be with ESV? My professor in Bible literature and the wisdom literature used ESV for our study. It's like, how can that be? So anyway, that's I don't know, that's the preference of my professor who is also really from really in a very, very reputable university. And what I really have read or heard is not the deletion of the whole verse in the King James Version, but just a verse that's not complete. It's, for example, what I just remember is therefore there is no more condemnation for those who are in Christ Jesus, who after the Spirit and not after the flesh.
After the flesh, but after the Spirit.
The last words were not read in NIV, but it's still in KJV. But I don't remember the deletion of the verse itself. That's what I didn't.
But you need to go a step further and ask why.
Yeah.
Why? And that's what we're going to deal with in the next chapter.
Thank you so much, sir. I'm interested with that, because when I study, I just don't take one version or one translation. I read several translations because I want to know the differences among the translations where I can get the better understanding.
Good.
Thank you so much, sir, for the explanation.
Okay. Let us look at good Bible dictionaries. This is another tool that you're going to want to use. And I list several here. The Anchor Bible Dictionary is one of the best that's out there, although it tends to be liberal in some areas. But in terms of scholarship, it's very good. The New Interpreter's Dictionary of the Bible is also a good. Each of these have 4 volumes. ISBE, the International Standard Bible Encyclopedia, is good. It's a conservative, scholarly dictionary, and you can't go wrong with that. The New Bible Dictionary is a 1 volume. It's smaller than the others, but it also is good, evangelical. Baker Encyclopedia of the Bible, Lexham Bible Dictionary, which, by the way, I have here is free on Logos Bible software, and the Zondervan Encyclopedia of the Bible. All of these are good Bible dictionaries, and we could add, there are others, but this is just a sampling. So if you're going to work on a certain topic, you can just get one of these, look it up, and it will be very helpful for you. There are also specialized dictionaries, and we list several here. All of these are from the same series. They're all published by InterVarsity, and they are all really top rate. Dictionary of New Testament Background, Dictionary of Jesus and the Gospels, of Paul and his letters, and later New Testament and its development. We also have the Dictionary of Biblical Imagery. Now, in terms of concordances, if you have Bible software, it pretty much eliminates the need for concordances. All of these concordances that I list here are geared to the King James. But if you have Bible software, for example, in Logos, I can look up a word, and rather than having it look up in King James, I'll have it look up in the top Bibles, my favorite versions. So it would look up the word in all of those. Concordance tells every place that a certain word that you're looking for appears in the Bible. With Bible software, you can hunt not only words, but phrases where 2 different words come together in the same verse. And so if you have Bible software, it pretty much eliminates the need for concordances. Here I just mentioned Strong's, Young's, and Cruden's. And they say there's Strong's for the strong, Young's for the young, and Cruden's for the crude. Okay. Good exegetical commentaries. And the key word here is exegetical, because you can buy commentaries that are more homiletical, sermon commentaries, that kind of thing, devotional. But what you're going to want, those have their place. But if you're going to be doing scholarly work, you're going to want exegetical commentaries. And I'm not going to go into all of these, but these are series in which many volumes appear. And you may ask, well, which is the best one? Well, that's hard to answer, because there is not one series that has all the best volumes. So, the commentary on Matthew may be the best in the Anchor Yale Bible, but the commentary on Mark, the best one may be in Black's or Harper's commentary. So you need to evaluate each one. And we actually have 2 pages here. Probably in the New Testament, for the overall quality. Let's see, let's go back up. the NICNT, and I believe that's at the bottom of the page there. It's covered up in mine. But that is perhaps the best overall series in terms of commentaries. There are also some specialized commentaries. Craig Keener, the IVP Bible Background Commentary, and Bruce Metzger, a textual commentary on the Greek New Testament. In terms of computer programs, we mention here Logos, which is what I use, which I would recommend. What you can do on that is amazing, and I probably don't use a tenth of what you can do. You can get the basic software free, but then if you want to add a lot in terms of books and all, those will cost. But they do offer a free book every month, probably up to 4 free books every month. Some of those are very good. BibleWorks has been very popular, but it's been discontinued. And so they're no longer revising that. Accordance would be the other most popular among New Testament scholars. And I don't use Accordance, but I know some people really love it. And then eSword is free. You can download eSword and you can use it free. Most of the books that you're going to get on that are pretty old. They're what we call public domain books. So the copyright, they're no longer copyrighted. And some of those works are really good. And so if you would like Bible software, you can't afford to get one that you have to pay for, eSword would be an option. There are theological dictionaries, and I'll mention a couple here. The Theological Dictionary of the New Testament. This is probably the world's greatest linguistic tool. Some of it is dated now. It began in the 1930s and went through probably the 80s. When I was in seminary, it was coming out. And so for my birthday, my wife would get me a volume of Kittle. And for Christmas, my wife would get me a volume of Kittle, until I got them all. There are 10 volumes. It's been abridged into Little Kittle. And it will take a concept, a word, a Greek word, and it will tell you about how it was used in the Old Testament, in the Septuagint, in Greco-Roman culture, in the New Testament, and then in the early church. There is also the New International Dictionary of New Testament Theology and Exegesis, which is also good. The new Dictionary of Biblical Theology also, we'll just mention here. Lexicons, if you want a Greek lexicon to look up Greek words, the must-have if you're going to do Greek exegesis is Walter Bauer, Greek English Lexicon of the New Testament and Other Early Christian Literature. And third edition. Third edition is a great improvement over earlier editions. When I taught Greek 3, I told my students, if you have to sell your firstborn to get the money to buy this, do it. Okay, now that's an exaggeration, but you really need Bauer's lexicon if you're going to do Greek exegesis. Another one is Louw-Nida, Greek English lexicon of the New Testament based on semantic domains. Bauer goes A to Z, alpha to omega. Louw-Nida group their definitions by kinds of words. So it's easier to compare different words that are used in the New Testament. And then introductions. And this is mentioned in your syllabus. We won't go into this, but different New Testament introductions. Achtermeyer, Green, and Thompson have a good introduction. David De Silva has a huge introduction that gives background material as well as dealing with the individual books, which Carson and Moo don't really do that much. Bart Ehrman is a liberal and agnostic, and but he has a New Testament introduction. Some of it is going to be good, but I'm sure that his theological stand is going to come through at times. Donald Guthrie, New Testament introduction from 1970. It's getting pretty dated, but it is an excellent introduction. Everett Harrison, also getting somewhat dated, is much simpler than Guthrie, but is also good. Luke Timothy Johnson, he is a Roman Catholic, but he is a conservative and he puts out good stuff. Kuhl's introduction is quite liberal. Ralph Martin has a 2-volume work, which I understand is getting revised and may have already come out. Ralph Martin has passed away. And then N.T. Wright and Michael F. Bird, New Testament, the New Testament in its world, an introduction to the history, literature, and theology of the first Christians. Dickie, can you hand me that book, the big book there? Okay, I'm going to show you the one by Wright and Bird. This is it. This is like almost 900 pages. And you can tell I've been reading it so much that the spine has come apart, so I've taped it together with tape. But it's very good. Very good. I have found a couple places where I think that they are just wrong on some of their historical stuff, which N.T. Wright is a great historian. But when he says that the gospel first went to Europe when Paul and Silas went to Macedonia, that is simply wrong. There was already a church in Rome. And I don't know why they would say that kind of thing, but that's okay. It's a great book, and it's also a good introduction to the work of N.T. Wright. Okay, that brings us to the end here. Does anybody have a question or comment before we go?
Sir, I have a question about the books that you recommended.
Yes.
Is it true that I just wonder, the dictionaries, the encyclopedias would basically present the world behind the text kind of idea?
Yes.
And yeah,
yes,
basically.
that's right.
So what category of references would be the ones that cover the world in front of the text, the cultural context of the passages?
Well, the world in front of the text is the reader. The world behind the text would be cultural, historical, and having to do with the author. So all of these would be more the world behind the text.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Okay. We also have gospel parallels here. And let me just say, the first one that's mentioned would be my highest recommendation. Okay, our time is up. I'll let you go. Have a wonderful weekend. And I will be ministering in Bakersfield, California this Sunday. And it's going to be 102 degrees there. So pray I don't get too hot. 102 Fahrenheit. God bless you.
Pretty hot, sir.
God bless, sir.
And we will
God
see
bless
you Wednesday
preaching.
morning.
God bless,
God bless
pastors.
you,
Thank you.
Pastor Galen.
Take care.
Okay, cool.
Thank you,
Have
Pastor.
God bless
a great weekend.
everyone.
Thank you, Dr.
Bye.
Galen. God bless.
Thank you.
Thank you.